Hungarian Folk Tales. The Poor Cobbler and the King of the Winds. There was once a poor cobbler who toiled all day and all night and had more children than there are holes in a sieve. One day he mended the shoes of a miller, who paid him with flour, and he was carrying the flour home when the wind blew all the flour away. Well, that's too much. I'll go and find the King of the Winds to let him know it was heartless to take that sack of flour away from me. He made his way through many lands until he arrived at a beautiful meadow. There he saw a whirlwind approaching that blew the dust from the road up into a spiralling cloud, and the poor cobbler was so very afraid that he took his hat off and lay flat on the ground to save himself from the raging wind. "You are wise to recognize and bow down before my power," said the King of the Winds, "or else you would have fared much worse. Tell me, what brings you to this distant place?" "I came for compensation from you, Your Majesty. The other day I was paid a sack of flour, and I was just carrying it home when a youthful breeze blew it clean out of my hands, and now my family have no food to eat." "Leave that to me. That wicked wind will suffer for its deeds, but I will not let you suffer any longer." So the king led the poor cobbler into his palace, where he fed him and gave him a magical lamb. Then he said, "When you arrive home, simply say, 'Shake yourself, O lamb,' and the lamb will shake off enough money to keep you for a month. But beware not to try this before you arrive home." The poor cobbler took leave from the King of the Winds and left for home. But his curiosity overcame him, and he simply had to see what the little lamb could do. As soon as he uttered the word of command, the ground around the lamb was showered with gold coins. He soon reached his lodgings for the night in the house of a very old friend, and he warned his friend never to say, "Shake yourself, O lamb." But the poor cobbler had hardly fallen asleep when his host and his wife ordered the beast, "Shake yourself, O lamb." When they saw the gold coins scatter on the ground, they took the animal and replaced it with a lamb from their own flock. The poor cobbler woke the next morning, but failed to notice the change. He thanked the man and his wife and left for home with high hopes in his heart. When he eventually arrived back, he said, "Shake yourself, O lamb." He repeated the order a number of times, but the little lamb simply stood and stared back at him. The cobbler then set off again to visit the King of the Winds, and he was very angry. He marched straight to the palace to voice his complaint. "I am sure you did not take my advice, and you must have spoken to the lamb before you reached home. But this time I will give you a tablecloth, and all you have to say is, 'Fill yourself with fine fare, O tablecloth,' and it will be covered in food. But do not be tempted to try this before you arrive home." But the poor cobbler was too curious again, and he tried the tablecloth. When evening came, he took lodging with his friend again, and he said to him, "You mustn't tell my tablecloth to fill itself with fine fare." The friend and his wife could hardly wait for the cobbler to sleep that night. They gave the order at once, and when they found out what a valuable tablecloth he had, they exchanged it for one of their own. The next day he arrived home and became terribly angry when he ordered the tablecloth again and again, but nothing happened. Again the poor cobbler travelled hastily back to see the King of the Winds, who was waiting for him when he arrived, and presented him with a small cane. He told him he should not tell the cane to "Turn around cleverly, O cane," before he arrived home again. The poor cobbler could barely wait to find out what the cane would do, and so he quickly said, "Turn around cleverly, O cane." The cane hopped up and began to beat him hard. The poor cobbler cried out in pain, "Stop!" and the clever cane stopped beating him at once. Now the poor cobbler knew what to do with the cane. On his way home, he stayed with his old friend again. He warned the man and his wife not to say, "Turn around cleverly, O Cain." But his wife's friend woke her husband at midnight. They took the cane into their room and she said, "Turn around cleverly, O Cain, once for me and once for my husband." The poor cobbler was quickly woken by their cries. "I told you not to address my cane, but it seems that you are the guilty one, so let it beat you as it will." "Oh, we promised to return both the lamb and the tablecloth." Then the poor cobbler ordered the cane to stop. But the friend and his wife did not wait for the cane to beat them again, and they hurried forth with the poor cobbler's lamb and his tablecloth, who took them home to his family, who never wanted for money or food again. And they all lived happily ever after. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Mayor's Clever Daughter. As many people know, Hungary's King Matthias liked to roam the country. Once he walked into a tiny village to see how the local people lived. There was an inscription on the gate of the mayor's house that read, "Here lives the village mayor. Here he lives with no trouble or care." King Matthias made a note of these words and scribbled the mayor's address down in a little book. "If your life's so carefree, Mr. Mayor, then it's my job to give you something to worry about," he thought. Then the king returned home. Back in those days, jugs were made out of clay, and one of the king's jugs had a hole in it. So King Matthias sent the jug down to the mayor, saying that he should mend the jug, or else have his head chopped off. The village mayor received both the jug and the message. He was very sad, because he really did not know what to do. The mayor had a pretty daughter who asked her father, "Dear father, I've never seen you worry like this before. What on earth's wrong? Why are you so very sad?" "Why should I bother telling you? You could never help." "But perhaps I can help after all. His Majesty the King has sent me a jug with a hole in it, with an order to mend it. But if I cannot fulfill his command, he'll have my head chopped clean off." "Oh, father, please don't be so sad. Send the jug back to the king with a message that he should turn the jug inside out, as material is always mended on the other side." Very well. And he sent the jug back with the message. This was a brilliant idea because the jug could never be turned inside out. After this, the king sent a millstone and ordered the mayor to skin it. This made the mayor even sadder, because it's impossible to skin a millstone. His daughter asked the mayor, Why are you so sad again, father dear? My sweetest daughter, you definitely won't be able to help me this time, but perhaps I can help you after all. His Majesty has sent me a millstone and ordered me to skin it. If I do not obey him, I shall have my head lopped off. But it's really not a problem at all. Write a letter to the king, asking him to have the millstone slaughtered, because no beast can be skinned before it's had its throat cut, and so the king should do the same to the millstone first. So the mayor sent the millstone back to the king with that message. The idea proved to be brilliant, and so this time the king ordered him to visit him at the palace. The village mayor went up to the palace where he thought he would be rewarded. But instead, the king wanted to know who had given him these inventive ideas, and so the mayor was forced to confess. I have a pretty daughter at home who helped me solve those two riddles. Very well, Mayor, I want you to go home and tell your daughter to come to my palace. She should wear no dress, but should not be naked, and she should not walk, should not ride, and should not come in a carriage. She also should, but should not bring me a gift. Head chopped off. So the mayor went home in very low spirits. He was convinced that his young daughter would never be able to solve such a complex riddle. The mayor told his daughter what the king had said, and then he added, "This is the end for you, my darling girl." "Why so, father dear?" "The king said you have to go to the palace. You should not wear a dress. You should not be naked. You should not walk. You should not ride. You should not go by coach. You should take him a gift, and at the same time, you should not take him a gift." "Very good, father. I shall go. Don't worry. Everything will be fine." So the girl took off her dress, but kept on her bra. Thus she was not wearing a dress, but at the same time, she was not naked. Then she took a billy goat and put one of her feet on the back of the goat and walked on one foot on the edge of the road. She then took a white dove and carried it in her hand, and this is how she went to the palace to see the king. When the king saw the girl, he was very surprised. Then the girl spoke to the king and said, "Your Majesty, I present myself upon your order." "This is your gift," she said, and let the dove fly away. Thus she took, and she did not take a gift. Then the king said, "Everything is fine, my girl, but tell me, why did you not hide your private parts instead of your bosoms?" And the girl replied, "Your Royal Highness, my private parts were created by God, but I grew my bosoms myself. I am ashamed of them, and that's why I hid them." The king gave the girl a handsome reward, and that is the end of my story. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Starry-Eyed Shepherd. Once upon a time, there lived a poor man. He had only one son and a wife. One day his son said, "Father, I'm going to leave home and seek my fortune." "Son, be sure to take the path where there's no mud." Then his parents gave the boy a bundle of food and bid him farewell. The boy walked and walked. He walked his way across 7 lands. He did not stop until he arrived at a lush green meadow, where he saw a flock of sheep grazing unattended. "Those poor sheep have been left all alone. I shall watch over them until their shepherd returns." The time passed, but no shepherd appeared. The boy stayed with the sheep until he ran out of food. He thought he would take the sheep down to the local town, where he would sell a few of them to buy some food for himself. The boy walked down into the town and sold a handful of lambs to the local butcher. He then used the money to purchase all that he needed and settled down with his sheep at the edge of the town. A king also lived in this town, and he was a very cruel king indeed. He was so very cruel that he had people executed for not saying "bless you" whenever he happened to sneeze. One Sunday morning, the king sneezed unusually loudly, and so all of his soldiers rode all over the country to order the common people to say, "Bless you, your highness, your very good health." The young shepherd was still out in the meadow watching over his flock when the soldiers rode up to him and ordered him to bless the king, but he refused to obey until the king granted him the hand of his beautiful daughter. So the soldiers carted the shepherd boy off to the palace and presented him to the king. The king's beautiful daughter was also there when they arrived, and she liked the young shepherd, but said nothing of it to anyone. Then the king addressed the shepherd, saying, "Will you not bless me, your king, and wish me good health?" "I will not, your highness, even if you have me killed, though I happily would if you let me marry your beautiful daughter." "A lowly shepherd boy like you will never marry my beautiful daughter." Then he ordered his soldiers to throw the shepherd boy to the hungry wild pigs. There the shepherd boy took out his flute and played a merry tune to the fat pigs. And the pigs liked the music so much that they began to dance. The shepherd made them dance until the pigs began to sweat and were all so tired that they fell fast asleep. Then the starry-eyed shepherd felt tired too and laid his head down for the night. In the morning, the marshal went to see if the boy was still alive, and when he saw that he was, he took him before the king again. "Now, young shepherd, wish that God should bless me and give me good health." "I will not, your majesty, not until you grant me your daughter's hand, not even if you throw me into the pit." "Guards, throw him into the pit with the scythe blades." "Oh, that's no joke. If I'm cast down into the pit," the shepherd thought, "the blades will cut me to shreds." The soldiers asked the shepherd again, "Well, will you now ask that God bless the king and wish him good health?" "Wait 1 minute, my good men. Leave me alone for a moment while I think." So the soldiers left the starry-eyed shepherd alone. The young shepherd stuck his crook into the ground, took off his coat, and then put his hat on top of the crook. He shouted to the soldiers, "Now you can come in and do with me what you will, for I shall never wish that God bless the king and give him good health." Then he swiftly hid himself in a dark corner. The soldiers were sure that the crook, the coat, and the hat were the shepherd boy, so they threw them into the pit. The candle down in the pit went out, and so they thought that the poor shepherd had landed on it and died. The very next morning, the marshal went out to check the pit. He heard a pretty tune playing on a flute inside. What on earth can this mean? It's impossible that the shepherd is playing his flute. So he opened the door of the house and saw the shepherd there merrily blowing his flute. He locked the door on the shepherd and ran back to the king. Your Royal Highness, the starry-eyed shepherd is still alive. Bring him before me at once, the king demanded. The shepherd was again presented, and the king again told him, Ask that God bless me and wish me good health. I will never do such a thing until I can marry your daughter, even if you have me thrown to the owls. Take him to the tower. He will soon beg God to bless me and wish me good health when the hungry owls peck out his starry eyes. So they took the shepherd boy to a chamber in the tower. But as soon as the door was closed, he took out his flute and began to play, and a miraculous thing happened. All the animals in the tower began to dance to his merry tune. The animals screeched and shrieked, and the young shepherd made them dance until they were all tired out. Then they all pulled themselves away and fell fast asleep. Then the shepherd joined them and slept until morning. The next morning, the marshal went up to the tower. He opened the door to see the boy sitting and laughing to his heart's content. The king's marshal ran quickly back to his master. Your Highness, the shepherd is laughing as happily as if he owned the whole land. What a tough boy he is. He cannot be killed. Bring him here at once. It is true that you cannot be killed. Now sit in the golden carriage. So the shepherd boy sat in the golden carriage, and they drove deep into the silver forest. Then the king asked, Tell me, shepherd, if I gave you this splendid silver forest, would you ask that God bless me and wish me good health? No, your Royal Highness, I would not. It's not the silver forest that I long for, but your daughter. Then they drove further still until they came to a golden pond where all the fish and water creatures were made of the purest gold. Then the king asked once more, If I gave you this pond, would you ask that God bless me and wish me good health? No, never, your Royal Highness. Then let's drive on. They soon arrived at a wonderful white wall made of marble, and within the limits of the wall stood a palace studded with sparkling diamonds. It truly was a beautiful sight. Now, shepherd, ask that God bless me and wish me very good health. I will not, your Royal Highness, until I can marry your daughter. What a terrible fellow you are! And as nothing else could be done, the king let it be known that his daughter would marry the starry-eyed shepherd, and the wedding would be in 2 days' time. He warmly welcomed all his subjects to the feast and offered a banquet of good food and fine wine, and all the men in the kingdom attended, along with their wives, who all ate and drank to their heart's content. The tables were piled high with delicious dishes, including hot horseradish that made the old king sneeze. Then the shepherd began to say, May God bless you, sire, and give you good health. May God bless you, sire, and give you good health. May God bless you, sire, and give you good health. And he said it over and over until the king interrupted. Stop telling me that, son-in-law. If you stop saying it, I will grant you all I have, my country and my kingdom too. Then the king gave all he possessed to the starry-eyed shepherd, whose poor parents moved to the palace, and they all lived happily ever after.